Hello everyone, I hope you know I am Kate Spencer-Ellis and I'm the head of sixth form here at Forest, and I'm really delighted to welcome you either live or after the event to this evening's Forest Focus webinar on transition to sixth form. We're not expecting any technical difficulties tonight, but if we do experience any, then do please bear with us. I'm going to speak for about 15 to 20 minutes around the transition from Year 11 into Year 12 at Forest, and a little bit about the nature of that transition. Importantly, what I'm also going to do is talk about how we help Year 12s manage that transition from Year 11, from the middle school, into Year 12. And I'm going to be talking about students who are already well established in their Forest journeys, and also those students who are completely new to Forest. I think what I'm looking forward to most about the webinar is about hearing from some of our new school student leadership team, who are going to offer some of their reflections and insights into how they manage the transition from Year 11 into Year 12. And I think that they'll give us a great deal of food for thought. If you have any questions for me, you can easily contact me by emailing me at ksc@forest.org.uk. Now, one of the things you might be thinking is, who is that red-headed person on screen? Well, the answer is, I'm afraid, me, and it's me in 1997, just as I was leaving sixth form. And I always show this picture to students who are joining our sixth form, not because I am keen on embarrassing myself, but because I want to make the really important point. The part of my drive for being head of sixth form and doing as good a job as I can every day is that I actually want other sixth formers to have a better experience than I did as a sixth former. Now, on the surface of things, I had a good sixth form, I collected some good A-levels, I got into a good university, and I developed some lifelong friendships. But also there were things which were less than perfect about that experience, which I really hope that we at Forest address in some ways and will continue to address. And one of those things was that I felt like it was my job to collate academic qualifications only. And while there's absolutely no doubt that that has been really important, what I would also say is that it didn't seem to me that anyone was very interested in my wider personal development. And that is also something that we at Forest are really, really interested in. The other thing I would say is that when that young woman down there, scarcely recognizable to me now, I got stressed. It was the late 90s, so we didn't talk about mental health, we talked about stress. I went to my GP, and my GP asked me who was responsible for my care, my personal development at school. And I remember genuinely not being able to answer that question. And one of the things is I am very determined for all of our sixth formers is that they would all be able to answer that question, not necessarily in the same way, but that they would all have trusted adults who would be able to support them through their sixth form journey, whether that's pastorally, whether it's be with regards to their next steps, whether it be about really cultivating their intellectual appetites. I want there to be someone who is out there supporting them. So, enough about me. When we talk about transition to sixth form, I think sometimes heads of sixth form like me can be slightly guilty of using slightly threatening, slightly scary imagery. And we often talk about bridges, but sometimes it might feel a little bit like this picture, which is you're very much aware of the beauty and the opportunity of your surroundings, but perhaps what you're less aware of is how you are going to manage this opportunity. And sometimes you can feel simultaneously as if you're about to see something wonderful and beautiful and access opportunities, but also a little bit scared and nervous. And I think as we get older It's sometimes kind of fashionable to be kind of ironic or nonchalant around transition and change. And actually, one of the things I try and inculcate in sixth formers is actually it's really useful to talk about the nature of the change, because that change will help to foster self-awareness. So, how is the sixth form different from year 11? Well, this is a question that I think I know the answer to, but actually my answer is somewhat irrelevant. What I have done over the years, I have repeatedly asked year 12 this question, and this is what they say consistently. So they talk about things which are general and they talk about things which are specific. And I don't think any of these things are hugely surprising, but I think it's worth just taking a moment or two to go through them and think about what it is which is different. So the two words which come up again and again and again are independence and flexibility. Students deserve, they need, they thrive if they have both of those things, but in kind of managed amounts. And sometimes, as always, when we get independence, when we get flexibility, especially perhaps when we haven't had as much, we can mismanage it and misuse it. So managing that independence and flexibility really well is something which is really essential. Many sixth formers talk about the bigger workload. Although I'm always a bit cautious when a year 12 or a year 13 talks as if GCSEs were a complete walk in the park, I think there's a kind of strange snobbery which builds into sixth formers about how straightforward or easy GCSEs were, when my experience is that their same selves 6 months ago did not hold that same opinion. But there is a bit bigger and slightly different workload. They talk about self-monitoring. You are more in charge, and with that comes risks and responsibilities. That it becomes compulsory to be self-aware, to know deeply your strengths and your weaknesses, which I think we would agree are essential for all types of success, be it academic, be it personal development success, be it co-curricular success. More focused classes, I think they mean that in lots of different ways. I think that the classes are smaller, the teachers are more specialised and specialist, and there is a real love for learning which happens in the sixth form. One of my favourite things is to wander around sixth form classes, and I just think it's amazing that we have people in the sixth form who can talk about theoretical physics, who can unpack the love poetry of Ovid, who understand relativity and complex numbers, and also those who can write extraordinary essays about the French Revolution. All of those things are kind of extraordinary, and I think with that comes an academic freedom. I hope that all sixth formers find their niche, and for many of them that will be an academic niche, to develop their intellectual curiosity, not just to plug and plow through specifications, but to develop more. There is a sense of the changing relationship between pupils and their teachers. You know, they're accessing them as real experts in their subject. And they talk also about how, even though there are only 3 subjects or 4 subjects for the further mathematicians and EPQs, it is sometimes harder to keep on top of work. One of the things that students comment on is the size of the classes. The classes are smaller in most cases, and so there's a more sense of active participation. I think you'll find that in many GCSE classes as well, but I think you'll find it in A-level classes as well. It's of course the logistics that come into mind for some students. You can leave early. You can't just schlep off when you've finished whatever you want. You can leave after your last commitment. But also a lot more leadership opportunities. My very firm philosophy is that all sixth formers are leaders. There's not a special group who lead and then everyone else follows. Everyone develops their leadership. Far more opportunities, more full-on, more independence and study periods. one of the mantras of the sixth form is that there is no such thing as a free period. It is a study period. And getting that used to that feels quite hard. So those are the things that students quite often say. And I introduce these things to sixth formers, and at the end of the first term of year 12, the current year 12, as the ones before them have done, fill in a survey about which of those three resonates with them most. And you can see from this graph, the faster pace of work, expectation of independent work, the need for independent consolidation, and the more demands on your time are things which students really tangibly felt during their first few weeks as part of the sixth form. I also ask Year 12 to provide advice about the transition, not least because my feeling is that often Year 12s will listen to students who are older than them more perhaps than they'll listen to me. And they say things which you would expect them to say. They say that in order to have a good transition to the sixth form, you should use your study periods, ensure you pick the subjects you really want to do. The academic core is so essential that if you are unhappy or miserable or only kind of half committed to your subjects, that it is quite hard. Over the summer, we don't ask that students do much on their EPQ. There is a MOOC that they can do, but they start to really kind of compost ideas for their EPQ. One of the things they say is that students should get a good relationship with Anne. Anne's one of the people I'm going to talk about who's essential to the sixth form in lots of ways, and she is the convener and host of the sixth form cafe. Use the support. I think one of the things that I say endlessly, and I think sometimes really lands with sixth formers, is the importance of seeing support not just as something you need when you've got a problem, when you've got a crisis, but actually support is what successful people draw upon. No one in the entire world is brilliant at everything. And actually, successful people use their self-awareness to work out where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and then they find a team to help them capitalize on their strengths and work on their weaknesses. So using the support, the most successful students are constantly banging on my door. They're asking for advice. They're using the opportunities. They are not participants in this experience, but they are people who actively seek to create opportunities. Often heads of sixth form talk about the jump at A level, and I think sometimes that is a little bit crude and is a little bit catch-all, and I'm sure the students may talk about this later. But one of the things we find is the jump doesn't happen all at once, and it's very, very different between subjects. It's different, the jump to A-level physics than the jump to an A-level in a language. And it's different in English from how it is in geography. And sometimes at different points in the year, there's sort of steeper lines up. Talk to new people and go out of your comfort zone. I think sometimes it's possible to imagine that we don't notice or see the sort of tectonic plates of the social element of sixth form changing. I think many of year 12s will say that they are in different friendship groups, or their friendship groups have evolved and changed. And that's exciting, that's really interesting. But it's also sometimes a bit painful because people you've been committed to, friends with, perhaps since year 7 or 8, perhaps you drift away from. And I think that's sometimes quite hard to navigate. Try new things, engage with the co-curricular and the super-curricular. I don't believe that as a successful forester in the sixth form, you have to do everything. In fact, I think that's impossible. But I do think it's nice that by the end of year 13, you have tried something that you hadn't tried in year 7 to 11. Year 12 advised the current year 11 to enjoy the summer, be organized. You know, checking your emails and your teams are really helpful skills in life, and also for navigating the transition. There is support. Don't panic and stress, but do prepare for a change in pace. Then you'll notice that quite a lot of the things that the students said relate to academic transition. And I think just to unpack that a little bit, it's about the pace of work, the expectation of working independently on more difficult concepts and more independent consolidation. Many students, for example, in GCSE maths who are good at maths will have managed to do really well if they've listened in lessons, applied the concepts in homeworks. But if you're, for example, you're now moving to, say, further maths A-level, one of the things you're going to have to do is go over notes from the lesson, do your own independent practice. There's synthesis of ideas from across the specification, and there is more struggle. Struggle and challenge is good. It's really intellectually satisfying when you get out of the pit, but it is there and it's quite hard. You do need to focus and you do need to concentrate. Often when I'm working with students who are struggling perhaps with their time management, one of the things we do is we separate the tasks out into a sort of 1, 2, and 3. 1 being things which require you at the peak of your powers, really concentrating. And often what they find is about half the tasks are there, about another third of the tasks are kind of, tasks which require some concentration, and about a sixth are tasks that they can do when perhaps they're not at full capacity. Be adventurous intellectually. Find out about the co-curricular, the supercurricular work beyond the specification, and find out what you love, and find out what sparks your intellectual curiosity, and be more responsible. And we use an acronym in the sixth form, and I know as all self-respecting young people are, they don't like acronyms, but this is quite a useful one. And just remembering that actually this is a toolkit to help you navigate through these. At the beginning of year 12 and through to year 13 is really helpful. Knowing your values, knowing what's important and why, maintaining disciplined work, having good systems, practicing, and having an attitude which is conducive to all different types of progress is going to help you. And this concept of VESPA is something that we explore in the sixth form. I think it's really also important to acknowledge the social and emotional transition that is happening kind of beyond sight often. I've talked about more responsibility in changing social groups, demands of your time. You are developing skills to self-advocate. One of the things I absolutely love about foresters is that they don't manage, or they do manage injustice well. If they don't think something is fair, they will tell me about it. But that's a skill in itself, putting forward your point of view. We all know, those of us who have very vivid memories of being a sixth former, how strong sometimes that urge to reinvent and recalibrate yourself and navigate who you are is. And I think that's part of the sixth form journey too, as well as finding out what you think about big issues in our kind of obviously complicated world. Many sixth formers find that they change their minds. They encounter and engage with their own faith or non-faith and their beliefs and their spiritualities. They manage life's challenges. Many of our sixth formers experience a degree of privilege, but that's not to say that some of them don't experience challenges which are far beyond what I experienced in that age range. Finding out what type of leader you are, managing difference and conflict, and taking risk. And again, I would argue, without unpacking it too deeply, that knowing your values, knowing how to be purposeful and intentional, having systems, practice, and attitude, and a strong attitude help with those aspects of transition. I'm going to go through the next few slides really quickly, but I just want to really emphasize this point about support. I would describe Forest Sixth Form as an ecosystem, a community in which there are a lot of people whose job it is to help sixth formers flourish. And for the successful sixth former, there is a whole constellation of things that come together. Their future plans, their academic progress, their co-curricular engagement, their pastoral support, their access to information and technology, their administrative support, and of course their nutrition all play a role, as well as a huge amount of other things. And in the sixth form, we have a huge amount of teams to help you. And you can see from this slide, the academic team, the co-curricular team, the pastoral team, including, of course, peers and mentors, Place to Be, our counselling service, our deputy head of sixth form, our tutors, our chaplain, anyone you trust. Mrs. Milton, the safeguarding team, the health centre, the Sylvestrian Centre. Access to information and technology. One thing that I always implore sixth formers to do is make friends with librarians. They literally hold the keys to knowledge, and they are incredibly helpful. Administrative support, to help you find your way through the kind of deluge sometimes of notifications and emails. And food. They'll probably talk about Anne and the sixth form centre as well as the catering team. And of course, all the information about future plans. Often it's quite a strange time in sixth form because we spend a lot of time thinking about you leaving the sixth form. But we have a really strong network here to help sixth formers. And for most students, the most important people will be their tutor, their head of house, their class teachers, their peers, and the sixth form team. And I can't stress enough the importance of peers, because year after year when I've analysed the A-level results, what you find is clusters of students who really, through the decisions they've made collectively, go on to perform really, really well. And that's really exciting to see. So in terms of advice for parents and carers and for students, our key mindsets to managing transition is to remember that everyone is doing it. It's easy to think, the students new to Forest are experiencing transition, no one else is. But actually, my very strong experience is that actually by the end of the first term of sixth form, everyone will have felt a real sense of change. Induction is a process. We have an induction day, we have taster days, but actually the process is prolonged and iterative. Sixth formers who are on it administratively will manage this better than those who aren't. I would say that the next 2 points really go together. Be prepared to be surprised and don't believe the first narrative you hear. So if, for example, on your first day in the sixth form, you hear that the head of sixth form is a spiteful witch, don't believe it. It may partly be true, but it's not completely true. And do keep an open mind. Take responsibility, get stuck in, communicate, ask questions relentlessly. And one of the things I say to new students, but to all students, there is no Forest fit. I want you to add to the community, not just camouflage yourself into it. Looking at sixth formers who are successful in lots of different ways, I would say the bravery is a key attribute. And also knowing that transition might sometimes be hard, but it will be worth it. And what do we do to support it? Well, we talk about it, we promote self-awareness. We have a really strong, robust, detailed transition program. We also include bespoke provision for those who are new to Forest, and of course include academic planning to support transition. Our outstanding pastoral care means that all students should get a one-to-one with their tutor every fortnight, and that helps to pick out individual issues. And the final bullet point, which I don't think you can see, is about how we always collect data, we refine, we improve our processes year on year. Now, just as I've got to the last section, what I'm hoping is going to happen is that some of our sixth form team, our new student leaders, are going to magically appear. Here they all are. Right, I've talked for long enough and my voice is, as you can all hear, completely giving up on me. So what I'm going to start by asking is, what was the move from year 11 to year 12 like for you? And if you just wave at me when you've got something to say, and I will then introduce you. So what was the move from year 11 to year 12 like for you? who's going to go first? Thank you, Hope. Go for it.
It was surprising in a lot of ways. I definitely underestimated how much my social circle and would change and evolve, and not always in a bad way. I'm not friends with some people who I'd been friends with for a long time, but I've also made friends with some new people, and I'm, because of smaller classes, I'm now talking more with people who I wouldn't have talked to otherwise, and I've made some really, really good friends through that.
Thank you, Hope.
As well.
Anything else about what the transition was like? Emma, can I ask you, first of all, Emma, what A-levels do you do?
I do French, RS and English.
Very good. So what was the transition like for you?
I mean, in terms academically, I'd say I don't think you can sort of understand what it's like until you're there. You won't understand the idea that there's going to be a jump, and also the fact that your jump in a subject will definitely come at a different point to your friends. So for me in French, the jump comes very quickly, and like lesson 1 we were looking at French law, and that was very different from talking about summer holidays in like just June of year 11. But then jumps for other subjects came at different times, so it was quite hard when all your friends around you were like, oh gosh, this is quite easy, and I'm like, oh god, it's actually really hard. But then a few weeks later they're like, oh, this is really hard, and I'm like, oh, I'm okay now. Like, I think that was definitely something that I wasn't prepared for, and I think it's really important that at the start of year 12 you look at yourself independently and you reflect on your own academic and kind of social circle as like an independent figure, and try not to compare yourself to others, because at the start of year 12 it is a very personal like journey, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Thank you. That's really helpful. Joseph, what was the transition to the sixth form like for you?
The transition was in places quite difficult. In particular, as Emma was saying, with like I did notice the jump quite a lot. But one thing I found in particular was the need to be more independent, the need to do your own consolidation, do your own research on the subject a lot more than in GCSE, because there's kind of a bit of there's more of an expectation to kind of know what you're talking about always in your subjects, which you can only really do by consolidating kind of all the time.
Joseph, what subjects do you do at A-level?
I take maths, further maths, physics and computer science.
Brilliant. And so what does consolidation look like? So if I was a year 11, I said to you, well, what is this consolidation of which you speak? What would that look like?
So it could involve just looking through your notes or doing practice questions. So for maths in particular, you can look back through your textbook, kind of just take questions at random, see if you understand them. If not, look back at your notes. And you'll be doing that for quite a lot of your study periods, as well as doing it at home.
Thank you, and thank you for calling them study periods, not freeze, Joseph. Jake, what was the transition to sixth form like for you?
I think academically it was sort of more interesting than GCSE. I feel like, because you're choosing these 3 subjects that you can you're actually really interested in, whereas at GCSE you're kind of forced to do maybe like chemistry, which you are used to and don't really enjoy. So I don't know, I feel like you're you kind of want to do the work yourself, because you're genuinely interested in the subject, and that kind of like it makes it a bit easier than just GCSE maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you, Jake. I think there were lots of nods when you talked about like just like how empowering it is to have chosen 3 subjects, and how interesting that was. So I talk quite a lot about the different aspects of transition. Was there anything that I said that particularly kind of landed with you, that when I said it, you were like, yes, that was me. That was something I wish I'd listened to, or something I did listen to, and it really kind of helped? Go for it, Emma.
I'd say 2 things. I'd say asking for help and support when you need it are massive massive things. It's really hard starting maybe perhaps a new school, or even just starting sixth form can be a real challenge. And it's important to know there's kind of like no shame in having to sort of ask for help or ask for your friends if you need any support, because that's really going to get you through it. That's definitely something that definitely the past few weeks, when stuff's sort of been building up, it's hard sometimes, but it's really important and it will get you through it. And also just taking the 3 A levels that you want to study. I think Jake touched on it a bit, but it is so important. It is so, you spend so much time every single week looking and studying and revising these subjects. You've got to love them. And if you have doubts, or perhaps you're kind of in a position where you may feel that someone wants you to take certain subjects, but you want a certain path, it's really important that you take the subjects that you want to study, because when it comes to revising, you're not going to want to do it if they're not ones that you enjoy. Those are, I think, the 2 main things that stood out.
Thank you so much. Joseph.
So I think this was on a couple of the slides, but in particular, I noticed that the number of opportunities you get in the sixth form goes up by a lot. Like every day or so, you'll get a notification on Teams about, something new you can try, or what the next lookout lecture is going to be about. And I think what's just really important to remember is to take advantage of all of these opportunities. Go to the different events that the school puts on, take leadership opportunities like mentoring, because you don't have many places where you can gain these kind of skills, and it's important to take them, I think.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't work out, like you might go to a talk about being, I don't know, an astronaut or a deep sea diver or anything else involving depth and breadth, and you might think, well, that doesn't sound like that's for me at all, but actually that is as useful as finding out that it is for you. What else anything else that I said that kind of you would like to, that really landed, that you'd like to develop and just reflect your own experiences from? Let's go Jake first, then Hope.
Just touching on Emma's point about if you don't really enjoy your subject, don't choose it. I think it's sort of, that is right, but then also I've definitely had times where I've really hated Spanish, for example, and I've really wanted to just not do it anymore at A level, and it's so difficult, it's so hard. Then also there's been times where I've really enjoyed it and I've really found it interesting. So I think it was sort of like your enjoyment in a subject will sort of fluctuate. It will go up and down throughout the year. And if you start a subject and you really don't like it, don't worry too much, because you'll definitely get into it and it sort of changes throughout the year, I think.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think that's, for parents and carers, if they're watching their son or daughter really struggle with a subject, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means that it's hard. And finding something hard and not liking it are different things. But if you've never really kind of been in that kind of attritional kind of, this feels like word soup, or this just feels like awful, then when you first encounter it, it can be quite stark. That said, not everyone will go through that, and it's not, an essential rite of passage. What were you going to say?
Yeah, building slightly on another thing Emma said, your peers are so important, like in your journey at Forest. Something one of my chemistry teachers told me at the start of the year really stuck with me, and he said to us, look around you, you're a team, learn who, like within your class, learn who the mathematicians are, learn who the English students are, learn who the linguists are, because if you're stuck on something, then they are going to be one of the most valuable resources for you. And if you don't understand something and someone else in your class does, then it might be, I really struggled with this in the past, but you can ask them. And it's so helpful in the long run to have that camaraderie with your classmates, even if the camaraderie is built on all of you not knowing what's going on, and having that friendship and having that relationship with the people that you're working with is really, really important.
Thank you, Hope. I think that's really important. It's just about broadening, traditionally you might lower down the school, just have, it's the teacher you go to. But it's kind of broadening that. It's like almost like the difference between playing tennis and volleyball. In volleyball, you kind of hit it to each other and then over the net. And it's kind of that model makes for a really interesting and rich learning environment. It doesn't happen all the time in every single lesson, but it does happen sometimes. My next question is, I said quite a lot. Is there anything you disagree with or that I missed out in terms of the kind of transition to the sixth form? And by disagree, it can be quite a gentle disagree. It can be a subtle nuance rather than a pitchfork battle, although I'm quite up for a pitchfork battle if that helps. Anything that you'd like to either disagree with or add that I didn't talk about? Thank you, Emma.
The one thing that I'd say that I think we were talking about it in RS today, because obviously we've kind of got those lovely end of year exams looming. But I think it's really important that you stay on top of your revision and your revision materials as the year is going on. Because some of us have got to now and we're like, what was that thing we did in the first week? What was that about? And it's meaning that when we're getting to Easter and May half term, we're going to have to make a whole year's worth of sort of resources for the exams. And I'd say take your end of topic tests seriously, take those CDAs seriously, just try and do the best you can. And a big thing we were talking about in English as well today is that since year 7, you've been preparing for GCSEs, but since the start of year 12, you've been preparing for A-levels. And it's the idea that you're not going to get everything right first time, but if you help yourself out throughout the year, it will make A-levels much, much easier.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else that you want to add? Hope, thank you.
You're going to get a lot of advice in year 12. Lots of it from the lovely KSE, but also from your subject teachers, from your friends. And some of it's going to be conflicting. Some of it's going to work for you. Some of it won't. Like I got told by someone, oh, if you're not doing so much work, then that you can't have a break on a Friday night, then you're not doing it right. And then someone else told me, oh, you should never work on a Friday night and you should never work on a Saturday either, actually, because you're just never going to be productive. So you really need to figure out what works for you. Take some bits and pieces from what people have told you and don't always take, the word of every single peer as gospel. At the end of the day, you know who you are better than anyone else does. So play to your own strengths, do what works for you. I would say. There's also much more capacity, I think, for critical thinking in year 12. Within my subjects, particularly with geography, in year 11, we might have learnt a model. But then in year 12, we look at the model again and go, well, hang on, this model was made in the 1800s. We're still using it today. And actually, this model was only really tested on European countries. So can we actually be sure that it's reliable? And I find that really, really interesting. It's hard at first, but it really feels more enriching and exciting to be able to figure out, the extent of the accuracy of what you might have learned before.
Thank you. So I've got one important question, which is, this is a webinar directed at anyone who wants to watch it, but in particular parents and carers. In terms of the kind of support that parents and carers can give their new sixth formers, what is useful, and perhaps even what is not useful, in terms of supporting the children through this transition? Any ideas? Go for it, Jake.
I think one useful thing, especially in the sixth form and with A levels in general, how you have to sort of try and go into the super curricular as well. Just let's say your child's doing a subject that you know a bit about, or maybe you work in, maybe just at the dinner table or wherever, just going on a walk or anything like that, just having conversations about it, about the subject constantly, because or maybe not constantly, but whenever it feels comfortable. And I feel like it just sort of deepens your knowledge of that subject even more, and it makes the knowledge you have much more useful as well, because the whole point of learning about a subject is so you can talk about it in the real world. So I guess that's just having conversations.
Absolutely, brilliant. Hope, what were you going to say?
Yeah, similarly, take an interest in what your child is doing. I know my parents did completely different subjects to me at A level and at university. I do biology, chemistry, and geography, and they were really into languages. So they don't always know exactly what I'm talking about, but being able to talk to someone who is really enthusiastic about it and who genuinely wants to know is amazing. Like, take interest in what your child is doing. Also, it's such good revision practice to explain A-level concepts to someone who maybe doesn't know that much about the subject, because it really quite deepens your understanding of that subject.
Yeah, thank you. And finally, if we just because I'm looking at the time, Emma, maybe you can skillfully incorporate this into our finale where we'll be dancing. But if we could just think about oh no, I've gone blank. Just in terms of the support that you've received in the sixth form, and just to give people a flavour of maybe what you've enjoyed, what you found challenging, just to kind of sum up. Joseph, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. What support have you received? What have you enjoyed? What have you found challenging?
So one of the ways the school supports people is, it was mentioned in one of the slides, the one-to-ones that the tutors offer. So every 2 weeks, you can spend like around 10 minutes just talking to your tutor about maybe things that have happened in the week, things you're concerned about. They can talk to you. I found that's been really helpful, just for getting to know my tutor, who's been huge support. I think that was the main thing for me.
Thank you, Joseph. Anna?
I think just sort of using the people that you're quite closest to. So building that connection and relationship with your teachers is really important, because it helps to kind of help them understand you, especially if you're like going through a stressful time. It's easier to explain it to them. And I think that with smaller classes, they kind of come hand in hand. I think using kind of, I mean, Miss, you've been very helpful. That's just, I'm not just saying this because we're on a webinar, but KSE is really helpful if you ever need anything. And also your head of house and your tutor. But if even that doesn't work, just going to someone, any adult that you trust, is just more than enough. And anyone at Forest is willing to help. And then another part, which I was going to say, the last question, which does link to this, is using your parents. If there is a problem, parents are usually really helpful. And also kind of a message to parents, if your child comes home and they're in a bad mood, I promise they're probably not taking it out on you. They've probably had a really stressful day and they may have been set loads of homework, or they have a test coming up. And just sort of being there for your child, trying to make their life easier where possible. It's just, that's really my answer.
Thank you so much. Jake?
I feel like I understand sometimes it's not always completely natural to want to share all your problems with like this random adult you just met 2 months ago. So even just I know anyone at Forest would be willing to help. Just friend groups, even like peers. I think everyone in the sixth form is so understanding and so kind that they'd definitely be able to listen to your problems if you had any.
Yeah, and I think it is that kind of strong sense of community. I think is something that people, when we do an exit survey at the end of year 13, and that is something that people's talk about very consistently and very strongly. And that community is, I completely agree with Joe, better than some random adult. Hope.
I'd just also like to say that the Learning Support Department is an absolute godsend. They have so many useful resources for pupils, like all the way up to sixth form. So if you're really struggling with a subject, they're all so lovely. I've accessed their support and it's been so helpful. And I've seen like real significant progress since accessing their support. So they're also absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. Oh, I'm really pleased to hear that, Hope. I am so grateful to you taking your time out of your no doubt very busy evenings. This is 4 of our 6 newest student leaders, and I think it's really clear why they are such excellent role models. So we are going to come in to land now. I hope everyone who has attended the webinar has really enjoyed it. And the new schedule for webinars next term has been published and will go out in further dispatches. It's been really lovely to see you this evening. Thank you so much for coming.